Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let's do revision from last week to remind us where we are, and then we will begin the teaching from verse 13 to hopefully 16. Last week I said that I'm going to speak about different sadhanas, remember? So that will be covered in verse 16. If we get to verse 16, then that will be covered. Otherwise, it will be next week. Okay? We spoke of two, because we're in the Jnana Yoga now, in the Knowledge Yoga section. So we spoke of two parts of Jnana Yoga. One of them, actually the second part, we'll go straight to the second part, was learning to identify with consciousness, with my nature. That is, learning to identify once I have already heard in the light of the Shastra what is Atman. Atman is awareness, my awareness that is present. In fact, it's never not present. So that means that after some time of hearing, then the student's job is to assertively start claiming one's nature. Now, we're not pushing one out of denial. It's just like a father who, after some time of seeing a skilled child, his son, the father will start to push the son into moving forward, let's say beyond toys. Not because the son has because the father has any bad intentions. It's just that the father has a bigger picture. He sees where the future is, where there's bigger things to do for the son. So that means the father will naturally start to gently push his son into more mature parts of life. So similarly, this is exactly like that. We're not pushing out of denial. We're just saying that if we just keep on going that consciousness is all there is, and then avoiding the one that's saying that, then this can go on for a long time. So that means there needs to be that one stage, just like when the father pushes the son. That's exactly what this is, claiming that I am indeed Atman. So it does feel strange, but then again, what doesn't feel strange doing it for the first time in our lives, right? So this feeling of strangeness or awkwardness or like I'm not being true to myself, this is completely natural. The reason is because our lifetimes, we'll just stick to this lifetime, we've been claiming what we are not. And it's been normal. In fact, we got so used to it that it's very strange to suddenly start saying what I am. In fact, if you think about it, isn't it weird that we say what we are not all our lives and we feel comfortable about it? I am the body, I am the mind, I am my emotions, I am everything that happens onto my life. My life, of course, owned by what? Ahankara, the ego. And yet, when it comes time, when someone tells us who we are, our true identity, Atman, awareness, then when we start to claim that, it feels, even though that's true, a lot more true, in fact, that's the only truth, than the body-mind, that feels strange. So that's the paradox of life. So that means if it feels strange, it's completely normal. The other caution is that this is not about going to the public and going, I am Brahman, right? This is not it. This is pure, this is pure arrogance that happens, and nobody needs to know. In fact, here's what we need to know. Everyone already is consciousness. So there's nothing special about anyone claiming I am Brahman, I am Atman. Everyone already is Atman. The only thing is others don't know it. So there's nothing special. No one gets a reward for being wise. They just recognize for what's already true. So that means if one it's like this. Imagine having the need to say, hey, I'm a man. You know that? I'm a man. I'm a woman. I'm a woman. You'd be like, what's wrong with you? It's obvious. So similarly, we don't need to say what is obvious, that I don't need to say my identity because it's obvious. So that means that I can still speak like a normal person in the world, like I as in a person, but silently I know that's just a character. You understand? So it's still being normal. Nobody ever knows anything. Only the wise person knows. In fact, if I start to claim that I am special, then what does that imply? Who's claiming that? The ahamkara. The ahamkara is claiming and taking ownership of the knowledge that I have understood, and it's what? Now it's pride. It has pride of that knowledge. So then it starts to claim that and say, hey, I am special. I am consciousness. So that means that a wise person understands that this body is but a temporary gift to offer it for you. And this gift is a medium of transaction. Medium of transaction simply means that it is here to do its duties for the society, for the family. And it is offered to be used to either be wasted or to be used for the highest purpose. That's really a choice of the individual. That means I can go to partying all my life, and there's nothing wrong with anything, by the way. Just if I spend all my life putting this instrument to something that doesn't really cause any growth, then it's fine. You know, I'm just going to be reborn and going to continue. So everything's fine end of the day. So we're just letting you know that it's a medium of transaction and it's given to you. In fact, if you look at an animal, you're seeing like animal life, it's hard, right? The heat, the exposure, looking for food, constantly have to survive, have to find a mate. There's just no guarantee for the animal's survival. So that means to have a human body in itself is a boon. There's no greater privilege in the universe than having a human body. Knowing this, one should use that gift given by Ishvara for the highest good. We call this stage 2 shifting the I. Shifting it from what to what? Shifting from anatma to atma. That means shifting the I from the body mind, which consists of my mind thoughts, my mind's emotions, my mind's decisions, to awareness, to atma. And this has to be done consistently, which we will explain how as we go along. I'm just summarizing now. So what's the benefit of shifting the I from body-mind to atma? The benefit is, if you think about it, if an individual wakes up and is identified with their body, and the first thing they do is go to the bathroom and they go, I look really good, like they look in their characteristics, then what do you think their behavior is going to be outside? Because remember, how one sees oneself is how one sees everyone else. So that means if I wake up and I look at myself and I really am into my physical features, then that means that the first value that I will attribute to a human being, if not the second or third, but at least right on the top, will be their physical features. So that means if I look at someone on their and the looks are very important, that means the looks are very important to me. Why? Because I associate the I with my body and my mind. Similarly, if the I has shifted to consciousness, then if the individual looks at themselves as Atman, then how are they going to look at the world? Consciousness. And what's that going to do? It's going to remove the possibility of arguments or looking at differences. In other words, if a wave looks at all the other waves, the wave is always going to have gossip around how this wave is bigger, this wave smaller. But if the wave understands that all waves and I are both of what? One essential nature, the water, H2O, then there's no opportunity for comparison. So that's the benefit. That means the benefit is I start to look at everyone as equally. Okay, so then we talked about two selves. Now, caution, there is no two selves. This is just a preliminary teaching just to help us divide between Atma and Ahankara, okay, the ego. We spoke of the lower self, which is the Ahamkara, okay, that's the, what's Ahamkara? Is someone explain to me?
Doer and enjoyer.
Of what?
Of the subtle body.
And what's inside the subtle body?
The manas and buddhi, the mind.
Yeah, and what's the point of the manas and buddhi? What's the purpose of the manas and buddhi? And the chitta and the memory?
To function the jiva.
No, to have experience,
Yeah.
to feel, to understand, to hear, everything. So you're right. So that means that knowledge, that experience, created or cognized by the mind, cognized by the senses, of course, the 5 organs of knowledge, which then goes into the mind and intellect, that knowledge of the environment has to be owned by some individual. In other words, that knowledge has to come to a point in order to recognize that knowledge. It's just like if I remove this wall, then you won't know what this projector is showing, right? Because, why? Because this projector has to hit a surface. So this wall is like the ahamkara. So that means I can only tell what's going on because there's a stopping point. So that stopping point is what we call the ahamkara. Because of that, I can tell this is indeed my experience that belongs to this body and not your body. So this is what a ajnani, a non-wise person, mistakes themselves to be. They mistake themselves to be this wall. And this is where it all stops. That means whatever is on this wall, whatever experience is happening to me because I haven't inquired into who I really am. So I just take it for granted. That's who I am. I am this wall. I am this experience. But the wise person understands there's something prior, which cannot be grasped because it cannot objectify the self. There is something prior to the wall in whose presence the contents of the wall are known. And that prior to the wall is Atma, the higher self. The higher self is awareness. We all know that. Yeah? We also spoke, Tom, you inquired into what is self-inquiry. You inquired into what is self-inquiry. Isn't that interesting? One way to look at self-inquiry is just to remove the word self, okay? Because that can be confusing. Self just means it's about the subject. It's not about the object. So the comparison would be a cloud inquiry or nature inquiry. But self-inquiry just means it's about me. It's about the subject. That's all self means. So let's remove the word self away now, knowing what it means, and use the word inquiry. Inquiry simply means paraphrasing what you have heard in your own words. Just imagine if you're given a book and a professor asks you, please summarize the book in your own words. Think about what has to happen to summarize the book. You have to think about what is the author saying? What is the message of this book? That means I have to think, and that thinking alone is inquiry. And that thinking would then cause me to write the text in my own words. Now, never mind about the text, the important part was the inquiry. That inquiry is what we call self-inquiry, paraphrasing in the light of what I have heard, not regurgitating. Is it all clear now on self-inquiry? So that means paraphrasing what? Everything that I've heard in class, the Shruti, the Shastra. That means, in another way you can put it is self-inquiry equals, what's another word for paraphrasing? Summarizing, yeah. So just like you had a test, right, and you had to do a really good summary, that would be you had to do self-inquiry, and then you will have to tell about your self-inquiry. Okay. So that means that when the body dies, which we call the reflecting medium. Why reflecting medium? Because the body is reflecting that awareness, the universal awareness called Brahman. And when a universal awareness hits what's called a jiva, we call that jivatma. That's why it's jivatma. That means a jiva, that means atma, consciousness reflecting on the 3 bodies, okay? Or the consciousness reflecting on the panchakosha, the 5 sheets. Clear? That's what a jivatma is. Okay. When the body dies, awareness, that means you, keeps shining. On what? Well, it keeps shining like it always shines, but it no longer shines on what? A limited object, a limited reflecting medium. See, while the body is alive, the same eye, which is through all of us, the one eye is shining through all bodies. When one body in this room dies, as it will one day, then what happens is that same eye, which is functioning through all of us, keeps shining, but it's no longer shining on the body. Now remember, that awareness that's shining is you. So then you're going to ask, okay, what happens after? Right? If it's not shining on a reflecting medium, which is required for experience, then how is awareness supposed to know about myself if there's no reflecting medium? What is awareness? Sat Chit Ananda, limitless. In what okay, the word attribute. In what way is limitless known to you right now? In what way is limitless known to you right now?
As a concept.
In what?
As a concept.
Okay, that's true.
Sometimes through our silence.
Okay, it's also, yeah.
Our silence.
I'll ask a different question. In what way are you known to yourself? In what way is awareness known to you right now while the body's alive?
Through the senses. Through the body.
Through our breath.
Huh?
Through our breath.
Huh?
Breath. Through our breath and the sensations in our body.
Okay, any more answers? In what way do you know yourself as Atman right now?
I.
Yeah. Simple. I am. That's what we use. We always start our sentences with I am. I do, I walk, I speak, I listen, I teach, I run, I drive. You go to a train station, you always hear people go, I. That's the first word that starts with anything. That's the only thing that I cannot give to someone else. If I give to someone else, then who's going to claim the ownership of what comes after the I? So that I remains shining. And what happens when the body dies? Everything that comes after the I, that's no longer there. But the I still remains. Aren't you aware of yourself right now? Right? Of your existence? Are you aware of yourself right now? Can you deny your existence? No. Why not? Because that which cannot deny itself is Brahman, which is all consciousness. So that keeps shining as it always has, and it's as though the person goes to sleep upon death. What does this mean to say, as though a person goes to sleep? What happens when you're asleep? What's the one word we all say during sleep? Bliss, right? Bliss, fullness, wholeness, completeness. So what happens when the body dies? For a Jivan Mukta, a wise person. It's at this comparison, as though going to sleep, but completely self-aware of the self as what? Ananda, limitless. Okay? So that means that limitless, which always is no longer being limited by what? The reflecting medium. This is why we feel we're limited as long as we're in our bodies. That's fine, because as long as awareness, limitless, which you are, is reflecting on a reflecting medium, of course there's going to be sort of a sense of limitation. So it's no big deal. Okay. So consciousness, we also said, is like space. So that means whatever happens in space, whatever objects happen to do in space, whatever happens to those objects in space, does that affect the space? No. No, that means we can have an atomic bomb. The space is not going to affect it. We can have a divine mother, blessing all individuals. Space doesn't get affected. So consciousness is like space, which does not get affected. Why? Because it is all-pervading. So that means we said consciousness is what? Akarta, non-doer, and abhokta. In other words, it cannot do and it cannot enjoy. Why? Because what is all-pervading, how is it supposed to move if it's everywhere already? If it's ananda, limitless, or ananta, that's another word for ananda. If it's ananta, no ending, or limitless, then why does it have a need to perform action if it's already everywhere? So then we spoke of between a comparison between a jnani and ajnani, a wise person and a non-wise person, okay? We said that the jnani claims Atma as my identity, having heard the knowledge. So having heard, step one, now I start to claim Anatma as myself. Over time of having claimed Atma as my identity, what happens is the ego starts to become insignificant. Not that you can't destroy the ego, but just not something that doesn't have the power to move me. Understand? So we use the example of the wise person looks at the tree being a symbol for Anatma, from the mountain of Atma. So the wise person is not ignoring his body or mind or his ego. The wise person is just looking at it objectively and holistically. Whereas for a ajnani, a non-wise person, it's as though looking at it from the ground, where I'm so confused and so overwhelmed by how many sense complexes I have in me. That's what a human being does, right? We go to therapy, we go to physiotherapy, we go to psychology, and we get ourselves fixed because we're so overwhelmed with the amount of things, issues that we have with ourselves. So those issues, yes, are fine. We're not saying don't address them, but just if one just keeps addressing leaf by leaf, that's going to take forever. Because next season, all the leaves are going to grow anyway. So in the long run, I haven't really done anything significant. Okay. The benefit for a jnani, for shifting the eye from the body-mind to the Atma, is punya and papa. Punya means merit, or that which is dharmic, and papa, that which is adharmic. So punya and papa become decently insignificant. Decently, I put the word decently because if I don't, then you think it's irrelevant. It just means that if good happens to me, it's fine. If something that would be usually labeled as bad, it's also fine. Why? Because it's happening to a different order of reality, but it doesn't affect me, Atma. So that's the benefit for a jnani while living on earth. That means whatever happens, it's fine. Whether it's good or bad, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect me. We're not saying the jnani is invincible, because this is another image that goes on in the spiritual world. Like they're totally emotionless, right? They have no feelings. They're just totally, feeling 100% every day. This is all. Why is this not true? Someone tell me.
Because it's still in the body. There's still jivas.
That's right. It's called a vyavaharika reality. The vyavaharika reality. Just think of it. Ishwara created. Ishwara srishti. That means a reality created by what? Nature, which I cannot change. I cannot change the nature. I cannot change the nature of the body. I cannot suddenly modify the chemicals in the body to act differently. Why? Because I didn't create the body. And what I didn't create, I do not have the power to modify. It's simple as that. So that means a jnani still has the same emotions, still has the same worries, still has the same nagging husband, wife, all of that stuff. It doesn't really matter. Still dealing in the same world, which is actually very humbling to hear, but doesn't look at it as a big deal. Why? Because silently I know this is all just a dream, coming and going. Okay? So that means a jnani does not renounce action, but renounces pride of action. This is the big distinction. That means a wise person does not say, I am now beyond this world, so I don't need to act, but simply renounces the pride of action. Now, what does it mean to say pride? Pride. Yeah, I've done it. It's like my actions have caused this. I've done this, and this is what happened. Haha. Right? That kind of pride. That has been renounced. Why? Because there is a disassociation from what? The body-mind, which is subtle body, the ahamkara, to Atman. So the actions still happen, but there is lack of pride of those actions. Which is why we can still look at a wise person and see, why are they working so hard? I thought they were free. It doesn't look like they're free. It has nothing to do with their behavior. It's what's inside, which you cannot see. So this is called, pride we call abhimana. So that means we have, the word is karma, abhimana, sannyasa. You could probably know what that means. If abhimana is pride, karma is action, and sannyasa is renunciation, then karma, abhimana, sannyasa has to mean renunciation of pride of karma, of action. That's the attribute of a wise person. Okay. The question comes up is, how does one do this? And we just discussed that in one short sentence. But how does one renounce pride of action, right? That's a good question. By renouncing all actions to the field and cheerfully accepting the results, whether punya or papa. I'm going to say that again. Devoting all of my actions to the field. So let's pause. Why am I devoting all my actions to the field? Is this fake devotion? Or is this devotion based on knowledge? You tell me. No, what kind of knowledge? Huh? Yeah, that all indeed here is Ishvara. That means I'm devoting. So when I say the field, what do I mean by the field? The environment. What is the environment? Ishvara. Yeah. Okay, we're going to talk later that Ishvara and Jagat, there's this difference there. Just see Ishvara, that which is the all intelligence and all power from which the Jagat, which the world comes. For now we can say all here is Ishvara. Okay? So that means I devote all actions to the field and cheerfully accept the results no matter what they are. Now, let's get realistic here. This does not mean my house burns down and I go, ha 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 ha, right? It does not mean this. It just means that there's still the same response like an ordinary person, except there's a silent knowing all this comes and goes. You understand? And because of this, all this comes and goes, there's a relief. So in that sense, we can say cheerfulness.
Would that relief be in the subtle body?
Yeah, because because of the knowledge. So the person is relieved. This doesn't touch Atman. But so we're dealing on the jiva level, right? Because the wise person, there's still a body. So for a wise person, because I know all this comes and goes, there's just a genuine relief. I'm not so caught up. Because if I don't think that all this comes and goes, then what am I? My time, effort, and energy is invested in making it work. Isn't that what we try to do? We try to make things work according to our likes and dislikes, and that spends so much anxiety and attention. But it doesn't work. Why? Because by the time I make it according to my likes and dislikes, then it changes already, and my moods also change. So if I create a house and suddenly, 5 months later, my opinion on what a good house looks like, I look at my house and go, I don't like it anymore. Why? Because even the person's mind changes. But the wise person knows even my own changes come and go because they belong to the body. Let alone the world, but even my own mind, my own intellect changes. Because of that knowledge, I'm not so adamant, I'm not so persistent in trying to constantly modify the world according to my likes and dislikes.
So if you'd be working on creating something, and then somebody else comes along and really appreciates this thing that they're looking at and says to you, you should be proud of yourself, that's really wonderful. A better way to feel for you is rather than basking in some sort of pride, would be to actually enjoy the enjoyment that person is getting at that moment and just enjoy that alone.
Yeah, Martin's got great points. Here's a test question. If in the spirit of karma yoga, which will be a test today, which we will get into a group, if in the spirit of karma yoga, you do something very well, and someone just says, they thank you. They're like, oh my God, you're so wonderful, you're so good, you're so bright. How do you handle this without accidentally taking pride? Because it's very easy to go, oh yeah, thank you, it's me. How do you handle this in the spirit of karma yoga? Good. Who, because of what, was I able to create the house? Let's say it's the house, right? Because of my limbs, because of my heart, because of my brain. Who gave me, did I create my heart, my brain? No, it was given to me. In fact, I didn't even choose who my parents will be. And what caused this house? Did I use my materials? Did I create the wood? Or did I get wood from somewhere else? So that means everything I did was totally dependent on something that I'm not the author of, including the actual body that made it, the mind that thought about it, nor the materials that I used to create this lovely castle. That wasn't mine also. That was also grown from the ground. The tree had to grow. And who grew the tree? The rain. Did I create the rain? No. So everything that I made actually doesn't belong to me, which is a relief in itself, you see? So that means if I believe I'm the body-mind, then automatically everything that I've created as the body-mind now is an extension of that body-mind. So if there's damage to my property, there's damage to my body-mind. But if I dissociate from my body-mind, automatically I'm disassociating from everything that this body-mind does, including listening, teaching, doing, helping, offering, making, whatever it is. So that means in that aspect, as Lloyd said, as I said to Lloyd, in that aspect there's a relief. Yeah. So that means this body-mind creates immense problems in every way, because it creates ownership, pride. There is a sense of greed, want more protection, which means I have to deny the society for my own ends. It just creates endless problems, this body-mind connection. So the essential, fundamental principle here is to disassociate from the body-mind and see oneself as Atman, and this whole world is just what we will get into verse 13, 14, and 15, a dream. And this dream is independent of awareness. Actually, this dream depends on awareness, but I don't depend on the dream. Okay. Is that clear? Okay. Okay, here's a definition of what Ishvara is. Please take this down, because we speak of Ishvara. So here's a little bit more of what Ishvara is. Ishvara is 3 principles. Number 1, Jagat Karnam. What is Jagat Karnam? I'll give you, without telling you, I'll give you an example. There's a seed, an acorn seed, and it grows. That is Jagat Karnam. What is Jagat? World. What is Karnam? Maker. Who made that tree? Orders of Ishvara. What happened to that tree? Can we call that tree a world? Yeah, it's a world in itself. A leaf is a world in itself. An insect is a world in itself. This world is a world in itself. In fact, Jagat means nothing but scheme within scheme. What do I mean by scheme within scheme? For example, there is a scheme of what? Molecules. There's a scheme of atoms within molecules. There's a scheme of molecules that make up the organ. There's a scheme of organs that by putting them together make up the limbs. There's a scheme of limbs, which is a world in itself, put together that make up a human body. There's a scheme of human body which relates with the air, and the air relates with the trees, and the trees relate with the bacteria to release oxygen, and so does depend on the ocean. So that means the whole nation is what? A scheme of the country. The country is a scheme of the planet. The planet is a scheme of the solar system. The solar system is a scheme of the galaxy. The galaxy is a scheme of the universe. It doesn't end. So that means micro within micro within micro, or macro within macro within macro. It depends from which point of view you're looking at it from. So everything, Jagat, is scheme within scheme, depending from where I look at it from. So that means everything we see here and experience is nothing but these schemes put together, working together to create what we now see. So first is Jagat Karnam, creator of the world. That's what Ishvara is. Creator of the acorn tree, creator of a newborn baby, creator of oxygen, creator of everything. Second is Karma Phala Data. Karma Phala, P-H-A-L-A, Phala Data, D-A-T-A. Karma Phala Data, that means karma, you know, action, phala, fruit, and data is a giver. So that means Ishvara is the give. Before I answer, Ishvara is this. This is what Karma Phala Data, as an example. I have a ball and I drop it. What happens to the ball, the tennis ball? It gave me a result. What? It bounced. So what I do? I applied action, and then once I applied action by dropping, everything afterwards I didn't do, did I? What took over once I opened my hand? Laws of gravity, laws of velocity, laws of electromagnetism, laws of all of the different laws from that moment took on. That means Karma Phala Data, the giver of the fruits of actions, is that which is the totality of all the laws and orders put together which make my action possible. If I open my mouth high, what just happened? The vocal cords made a sound, The sound used air in order to what? Move at 1,000 plus minus kilometers per second to reach your ears. Did I set how fast the sound goes from my mouth to your ears? No. Who sets that? Jagat Ishvara, which is what? Jagat Karnam. The maker of these laws and the facilitator, the karma paladata, the giver of all of the results that happen in every moment of our lives. Is that clear? Who determines how fast speed of light goes? Not we, karma, Jagat Karnam, the creator of light. What happens when the light hits the wall? It reflects. In other words, the action created, the Jagat Karnam, the created world of light, hits another, they have a contact, and what happens? Results. Those results equals karma pala data. Okay. Third is Dharma Raja. This is the third principle of Ishvara. Dharma Raja. What is Dharma Raja? What is Dharma?
Literally translated religion, but I suppose we can say duty.
Okay. Dharma, you can say that which is inherently, what is nature. The nature of an object is dharma. The nature of the universe is dharma. So Dharma Raja, that means that one who sets dharma, the king Raja, the king of dharma. What do I mean by this? Example. Let's say, I'll give you an example. There is a wave, okay, in the ocean, and all there is the water. Now the wave doesn't know this. Why? Because the wave is a criminal. So the criminal wave decides to take a water pistol because all there is the water. And the criminal wave wants to pull the pistol, pull the trigger and shoot the other wave. Now the wave, not knowing that it's water, and so is that wave also water that it's aiming, the wave succeeds. Now, what inheres both this wave, the perpetrator and the victim? The ocean. What is the ocean? Ishvara. So that means wherever there is ocean, that is exactly where is what? Jagat Karnam, Karma Pala Data, and Dharma Raja. So in this case, because this wave is also inhered by the ocean, by Ishvara, which has the third principle, Dharma Raja, does that what's going to eventually happen? Because Samanya Dharma, that is universal Dharma of non-injury, is also imbued in this wave, because this wave is not apart from the ocean, this wave eventually is going to feel what? The consequences of its actions. Not immediately, but sooner or later. This is why it's impossible to injure a human being without eventually starting to feel guilty. If not immediately, sometimes it takes years, maybe some lifetimes. But eventually this feeling of guilt, I've done something wrong, it always arises. Why? Because Ishvara is Dharma Raja, the one that sets the Dharma, and everything that Ishvara creates, Jagat Karnam, which is this world, including these bodies, is imbued with what? Dharma Raja. This is why we all inherently understand ahimsa, non-injury. Why? Because we, Jagat Karnam, are imbued with Dharma Raja. So that means no one is apart from Ishvara, no different than the wave is apart from the ocean. In fact, it can't be apart from the ocean. There's nowhere else to go. There's only the ocean. All right. Now the teaching begins. This was all summary. All right. So we're all going to do verse 13, chapter 5, verse 13. Okay, together. Sarva karmani manasa sanyasyaste sukham vashi navadvare pure dehi naiva kurvan nakarayan. Okay, the first point is navadvare pure dehi. So, okay, so what this verse is talking about is it's comparing dehi, the indweller, to the navadvare. In other words, the indweller is the nine-gated, is resting happily in the nine-gated pure city. So the self, Atman, is resting happily in the nine-gated city. So what does this mean? So what this verse is showing us is the body is compared to a city. A human body is compared to a city. And this city is Navadvarani. In other words, Navadvarani is the nine-gate. But Navadvare, this is a locative, so it's in the nine-gated. Okay, so this is just saying in the nine-gated city, but Navadvarani is the nine-gated. So our bodies is what's called the nine-gated city. Now, why would it say this? It's comparing, it's using the body as a kingdom. So just imagine your body as a kingdom, which is called the nine-gated city. And what is a kingdom? A kingdom has walls, right? That's the first thing that a kingdom has. Walls are being compared to our skin. So our skin is the walls. And it's also mentioning, okay, so now you're saying nine-gated, right? What's nine-gated? Explain that. So it's talking about 7 entry points and 2 exit points. So now what does this mean? If you think about a city, right? In order for the city to survive, you need to what? You need to bring in food. You need to have certain points from certain directions so that the city can maintain itself. And the city also needs what? It needs excretion systems. It needs to take out its garbage, its sewers, so it needs to also purify itself. So this nine-gated city has 7 entry points, being 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. These are the entry points. For example, through your 2 ears, you have sound, through your 2 nostrils, air, through your 2 eyes, sight. This is how we receive information. So it's being compared to a city. That means our city, this Navadvare Pure, has 7 inlets. And 2 outlets is the genitals and the anus. That's how the body excretes its systems. That means we eat food, we need to get food out. So similarly, just like a city needs to have entry points and needs to have exit points, similarly our body has entry points and exit points. And the blood vessels are being compared to the roads. So if you think about a city, right? How does a city maintain itself? By trucks going from one, or cars going from one side to the other to deliver, let's say, the right materials to the other side of the city. So that means the roads need to be functioning well in order for the right facilities, the right transportation to go from one part of the city to the next. Let's say a lawnmower needs to take the street to go to the big public park. So that means the road needs to be working. If it's not working, then the park's going to suffer. And if the park suffers, then what happens? The people in the city suffers. The people, that is the cells, start to slowly suffer around the park, which start to then have depressed thoughts and talks amongst each other, how the city is not functioning well, and it slowly starts to contaminate the whole city. And the king of this nine-gated city is Atman. It doesn't say here, but he says indweller. The indweller is Atman. So the king of this city is Atman. So that means just like any kingdom, if it doesn't have a king, then what happens? The kingdom falls apart. There's no one to uphold and keep its values, its virtues. There's no one to enliven the city. So in this metaphor, they're using Atman as the king. And this king, Atman, is blessing the body. what? With life, with consciousness. So what this means is a jnani is a master of his kingdom, of his body. That's what the message is. A wise person is a master of his body in what way? A jnani is a, here comes a new word, a sakshi bhava. You've heard the word sakshi before. Sakshi bhava is, you can translate it, bhavati is he is, but we'll just say sakshi bhava. So you can translate it as being an eyewitness. So a jnani is being an eyewitness to his kingdom, who is happily, what? Resting in the nine-gated city, and is what? Illumining the functions of whatever is going on in the city. So just like if there's trouble in the city, someone needs to report that trouble, right? That someone needs to be there. If that someone's not there, then there's no one to report anything. So the fact that you can always report your city and all of the traffic jams that happen and the various conditions implies there has to be someone that's always present in the city, always looking. And that always looking is what's referred to as Sakshi Bhava. That means the illuminator of the city, the one that's looking over the nine-gated city. Now remember, here's the important part. This Atma is happily sitting in the body, implying what? That is not the body, because if you're happily sitting in the body, you cannot be the body. So that means that for a ajnani, a non-wise person, if I've not been told that I am not the body, then whoever is sitting in the body is going to be at first chance taken to be I. And what's the first thing that's sitting in the body from the moment of birth? Ahankara. It's a survival mechanism. It has to be there to own the experience of the individual. So that means the ahankara is sitting in the body for a non-wise person. A wise person, the ahankara is still sitting, but the wise person knows I am the illuminator of this ahankara. So nothing really changes. It's just the focus changes from one to the other.
Ahankara is ego.
Yeah, we use doer, enjoyer. Yeah. Okay, now it says also naiva kurvan nakarayan, which means it's that one that is happily sitting in the body is neither performing action nor causing others to act. Now this is a new topic that we're going to get to. The word action has two parts to it. When I say action, one is direct action. Okay, that means I directly do, that means I walk up to Tom and I just shake his hand. That was direct action. Now the second type of action is what's called indirect. What does indirect mean? It means it was something instigated me to act. What does this mean? If hail falls, what do? You take cover. So did you take cover or someone instigated you to take cover? So that means there are two types of action. One, I do it, and second, something else do it. Whether I know about that something or not, it doesn't matter. It still instigated me to take action. So that means direct means karta, direct action, karta. And indirect, in other words, the instigator of action, this is the second type of action, is kara vita. Kara vita. Sorry, kara yita. That's Y-I-T-A. Okay, so now a question arises. This is where we get into objection mode. If Atman isn't doing any action, we already established that in the last lesson, then who does the action? Because consciousness is all there is. If all there is consciousness, and consciousness is unable to perform any action because it's free, it's everywhere, it's all pervading, then, and everything is consciousness, then who does the action? What causes the action to happen?
Jiva.
Yeah, good. Good. Yeah, that's good as you're building up to the answer.
The jiva is consciousness.
The jiva is also conscious, but just doesn't know it. Yeah. So the jiva thinks I'm doing the action. I am doing the action, but actually I'm not doing the action, something else is doing the action, which is what we're going to go through now. Yeah. The other objection that goes with this first one, what's the first objection? If Atma is everywhere, if Atma is all-pervading, how can Atma do action? Or, that's already answered. But then the next question is then who does the action and what does the action? The next objection is, aren't we like all puppets then? Isn't Bhagavan Ishvara, isn't Bhagavan just, animating all of us? That's the other objection, because that's a common thing that comes. We're all just puppets and we're being controlled. So we have to cover these two objections.
So what's the objection with that?
That we have zero control. And we're just all like puppets, which implies what? That Bhagavan is causing the action. Is Bhagavan causing the action? No. Good, Tom. No. We'll find out why. Because that would mean, for example, if a criminal commits a crime, then if all there is Ishvara, then we will have to either directly or indirectly attribute that crime to Ishvara. Or Brahman, it doesn't really matter. We'll just say Ishvara. But now we have to get out of this objection, right? Because this is a common thing. God is responsible for the worldly troubles. We have to find a way how to get out of this thinking. Okay, let's just cover Ishvara now. Okay, forget about Brahman, we're just going to cover Ishvara. Ishvara is an impersonal power. What does impersonal power mean? I'll give you an example. Imagine you fill up your car, right? And the car now is a body. And the driver being a symbol for the intellect, the driver sits in the car, drives irresponsibly, and crashes the car. So the driver is the intellect, the body is the car. So the car has been crashed. Can we blame the fuel? Can we blame fuel directly? Like the fuel, it's the fuel's fault. Can we blame the fuel indirectly?
Yeah, because it helped the car to move.
Huh?
It was helping the car to...
Yeah, you see now we have to clear this objection, because that is a possibility. If the fuel wasn't there, I could have never crashed the car. So directly the fuel is not responsible. Indirectly the fuel is not responsible. Why? Because the driver of the car, the direct responsibility belongs to the driver, right? But the indirect responsibility belongs to whom? Someone else who instigated the driver to crash the car. Maybe the driver had a breakup, or maybe he was fired and was angry. So we're not talking about the fuel. We're talking about Jagat. You see, so the fuel has nothing to do with what happens in Jagat, in the world. The fuel is just that power which provides the possibility for a sinner to be a sinner and a saint to be a saint. But the fuel has nothing to do with either.
Ambivalent.
Huh?
Ambivalent is
What does that mean?
ambivalent. It doesn't care whether it's one way or the other.
It's an impersonal power.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think ambivalent is probably a better English word than impersonal.
Ambivalent.
Yeah.
Nice word. Ambivalent.
Undecided.
It just doesn't bother one way or the other.
Yeah, it's impersonal. I just say impersonal. That's the word we use in class. Okay, now let's move on to Atma. When I say Atma, what do I mean? Brahman. Atman is Brahman. It's just, okay, what is Atman? Someone tell me.
Consciousness. Brahman covered up by the five senses.
Done. That means Brahman conditioned by the body it gains a new name, a new label called Atman. So that means essentially Atman is Brahman. So that means from now on it shouldn't make a difference if I say Atman or Brahman. Okay? Now let's cover Atman. Atman is not responsible either. Why? Remember that example of the light? So what does the light do? It just simply illumines. So I'll give you an example why Atma is neither directly or indirectly responsible. Imagine there's a dictator, okay, and the dictator does a lot of trouble to the world, and the world, has a unfortunate circumstance because of that. Now, what happens later on when the dictator is finally, as they always go, right? They always get jailed up. So after they get jailed up, what do we usually do? We have two options, right? We either blame the dictator directly, don't we? For example, Hitler, we blame Hitler directly. Or what else do we do? If we don't blame him directly, then we do what? We blame the party that influenced him to be that way, or influenced her. So there's only two options. There's either direct or indirect. There's either that instigator or it was the person themselves. Now, does anyone blame space which accommodates the dictator? Imagine that. It would be quite weird, right? And what do we say about consciousness? Consciousness is like space. Atman is like space. It's that which accommodates the jagat, the world. Therefore, consciousness has nothing to do with what happens in this world. Ishvara has nothing to do with what happens in this world. They're both completely impersonal. In fact, I can't even say impersonal to Atma. The impersonal stops at Ishvara. We'll just leave consciousness as consciousness, awareness. Because if I put impersonal, that sort of gives an attribute to consciousness, like it doesn't care. Right? So let's conclude verse 13. Okay? The conclusion is, Atma, what is Atma? Yeah. When I say Atma, awareness, self-existent, Atma doesn't create anything. It has no karma pala. It has no results of its actions. It has no punya papa. Why? Because it cannot create anything. It's all pervading. So what doesn't move cannot have any action. What doesn't have action cannot have any consequences of the action. Therefore, it cannot accrue or occur unto itself any punya or papa. And it has no interaction between the karma and the karma pala, between the action and the results of action. The action and the results of action belong to what? What's the action? The driver. What's the results of action? Crashing. That belongs to what? The world, jagat. It has nothing to do with Ishvara or Atman. And we also said the ahamkara is the doer or the doership, the sense of owner of the experience. That sums up verse 13.
May I ask a question?
Rock, paper, scissors.
I'm a little bit confused though, because I sort of remember you saying that Ishvara is responsible for everything in a way, so and that everyone is innocent of their actions, they're just following their nature and...
Yeah, just wait for verse 14 and 15. We'll talk about nature.
So you were trying to put some blame onto this driver who crashed, and I'm just thinking, isn't...
We're not even giving blame to the driver or the... Why are we not blaming the driver? Because let's say the driver let's say it's an indirect action. Let's say the boss fired the driver. Isn't now the boss's fault? But can we really... Because see, it doesn't stop there. There's infinite variables extending back, because who made the boss think that way to fire this person and not someone else? There was another instigator of that. And then what caused the instigator of that? So nobody is to blame here. It's a totally impersonal power. It's like this. One wave in the ocean, right, has a very high tide. Can you trace the origin of why that high tide is there in an ocean? Impossible. There's far too many circumstances, pressure from the north, southerly winds, all of these combinations are working together to create this high tide. Impossible to trace back the action. Now remember what we say about ocean is what? Ishvara. So can Ishvara, the ocean, be attributed to the high tide?
Could you not say the inverse, that because it has to be responsible?
Isn't it
Because
responsible?
it can't.
Okay, Ishvara is that principle which provides the laws and orders for the high tide to happen. It is independent of the high tide. If I drop this in this world, Jagat, what helped this thing to come down? Gravity. That gravity is provided by Ishvara. So it's impersonal. That means if I go up a building and I jump, I will die. Right? Why? Because the law of gravity is there. But if I go up a building and I don't jump, then I don't die. So that means that gravity is impersonal. It's just there. It's up to me to use it. I can kill myself with it. I can cause damage with it, or I can create good things with it. Like I can use gravity to, launch a rocket. So gravity is just an impersonal power that's there whether I like it or not. How I make use of it, that is up to me. So that means what? Yes, it is my responsibility ultimately, but it cannot be Ishvara, because Ishvara was just there providing innocently its orders, its laws for me to use. How I use them, that is up to me.
Staying with the car analogy, it's probably better to say that if you were driving a car down the road, came to a bend, and there was another car on your side of the road the wrong way coming towards you, and you crashed, then you can't blame the first driver, because in terms of, it's different when you say the boss fired him, because you can sort of blame the driver because he wasn't thinking straight, whereas this way around, circumstances are just completely outside of their control.
Think about this one, Lord. This one is some reflection, okay?
You said in terms of who actually does the action. You said we think that it's ahankara that does the action, but is it actually...
We're going to this verse now, who does the action. Okay. Verse 14. Na kartritvam na karmani lokasya srjati prabhuhu na karma phala samyogam swabhavastu pravartate. All right. Atma doesn't do anything. So then how do all these actions happen? So this is answered in verse 14. Okay, the innate nature, it says, but one's own nature. So the innate nature of one's body-mind complex is what causes one to act the way they do. The innate nature, let's explain this. What does innate nature mean? Just like the innate nature, I used this example last week, of an appliance. Like the innate nature of a fan is to spin. Or the innate nature of a speaker is to produce sound. Or the innate nature of, give me one example. The innate nature of what?
Sugar is sweet.
Toast?
A toaster toasts.
Yeah, toaster. I was going to use toaster. And other appliances. The innate nature of the light bulb is to produce sound. Okay.
The innate nature of a fox is to kill a chicken.
The innate nature of a fox is to kill a chicken, of the tiger to hunt. Of the human being, it's a little bit different because we have a sophisticated mind, so we can create our own innate natures by our own decisions. That's where our choice stands. That's where our privilege stands as human beings. So the innate nature of every appliance is what causes that appliance to function as it is. Now, what do we say about Ishvara? Jagat Karnam. Jagat Karnam is what? Infinite varieties of different appliances, all performing their functions. So that means every function in the universe, every appliance, including your body, it's just an appliance, is performing its function according to its nature. Now, if you want to speak about the nature of the tree, its function is to create shelter and convert CO2 to oxygen. The nature of one person is what? According to one's samskaras. Okay? One's habitual tendencies. That's what makes every person different. That's why we all act differently, because we're born with different tendencies. I know Mozart was born in a family whose father was a very good piano player, and that wasn't an accident, obviously, because Mozart obviously had some skaras for playing in the previous incarnation. So he's born in the right family in order to exercise those samskaras, to develop them. So that's why he became such a good player. So that means every individual, let's explain this incarnation thing. When a being is born, the plant, okay? What does the being eventually release? The seed, right? Into the ground. Now, what happens eventually to that seed of the ground? It's going to sprout and it's going to produce new beans. They're going to also fall into the ground. sprout, produce new beans, fall into the ground. So that means every succeeding bean, every succeeding plant has what? The history of the previous. So let's say the previous beanstalk was exposed to high temperatures, so it had to adapt to high temperatures. And it gives birth to a seed, and then the seed now also has that high temperature adjustment. It's going to grow, and then it grows, let's say, 20 years later. And now 20 years later, it's very cold. So now it has to adapt to cold. So now it has adaptation to heat and cold. So this just goes on forever. So similarly, a human being's samskaras are just in the same way like these constant seeds being grown from the previous incarnation. That's why we are today the totality of infinite incarnations that have happened previously. Just a very simple example of incarnation. So it's not mystical. So that means that electricity, like electricity, it what? One electricity flows through all appliances. And it what? One electricity blesses all appliances, does it not? So that means if this appliance is faulty and somebody comes near it and this appliance damages another appliance, can I blame electricity? No, that means electricity is a totally impersonal force, a power, which just simply blesses the appliances. How the appliance is trained to think or to do or not to do is entirely up to the samskaras of the appliance. It has nothing to do with the electricity. And that electricity is being compared to what? Atma. That which blesses all bodies, all objects in the universe. So it just simply blesses. That's all this verse is saying. And it's also saying what causes the nature of humans, what causes the nature of everything? One's inherent nature, just like an appliance. Because we said, Jagat Karnam, that means the creator of the world. So that means whatever's created has a particular attribute to it, and that attribute will be flourishing itself while it's imbued with electricity. Or in this example, consciousness. Okay. Verse 15. Nadate kashyachit papam nachaiva sukritam vibhuhu ajnanena vrtam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavaha. All right. Okay. So we said, like space, it's unaffected by objects and the interactions of those objects. So not only of the objects, but also how interactions of those objects work together. Totally does not affect space. Okay, we all agree with that. So that means that, like space, Atman neither occurs any punya or papa because it's not involved. Like space is not involved with whatever happens, whether it's a loud sound, a quiet sound, a big explosion, or a divine expression of love being shared in the space. Space completely is just impersonal. It just it accommodates the world. Okay. Story. Smart criminal. The smart criminal commits a crime. And we'll just put it, what did he do? He stole something. He robbed the bank. How about that? Okay? Smart criminal robbed the bank. And the smart criminal has read the Bhagavad Gita. Now, the smart criminal is in the court, and he has to explain himself. And the smart criminal says, "Judge, please don't arrest me. I didn't do the crime. I was just a sakshi bhava to the whole thing. My body did the crime. You know, I witnessed my body performing the actions. It was a fantastic view, but I didn't do anything. This world has nothing to do with me. It's all just jagat, it's all just a dream. I'm just a witness of it all." So the judge kind of listens to this and goes, "Oh, he's a smart person." And the judge tests the criminal, says, "Okay, you're right. In your presence as the sakshi bhava, you indeed have witnessed this crime going on, no doubt. In the presence of Atma, this crime did go on. the body did break into the vault and it did extract the money. So that is why I'm not arresting you, I'm arresting your body-mind. So now, the criminal wasn't thinking about this, right? He's going to outsmart the judge. So the criminal was like, he's not happy about this. So the criminal goes to jail. Now, here's the moral of the story. If the criminal was truly identified completely with Atma, would the criminal have committed the crime?
No.
Why not?
Adamic.
Huh?
Adamic.
Yeah, good. And why else? There's another... Huh?
There's nothing to gain.
Excellent. There's nothing to gain. Okay, so raga, dvesha, attractions, repulsions, belong to what? The subtle body. Now, if the criminal was truly disassociated from the body-mind, that is the subtle body, then this who has to gain does not... What? Who has to gain? The ahamkara. But what did we say earlier? The jnani is one who identifies with Atma. Ajnani is the one who identifies with ahamkara. So this means this criminal is what we call partial identity. Very dangerous. Partial identity is where the knowledge is sort of been established, but it's still not firm, which causes the individual to then float around in some artificial created world. It's very common, actually. And this is extremely dangerous. So nothing to gain. So that means the one to gain is what? The body-mind. And who owns the gaining experience? Ahamkara. So that means a truly wise person, what do we say? The mountain of Atma is not associated or overwhelmed by the tree of ahamkara. Therefore, it is impossible to perform the crime as a fully realized person. Because who's there to gain? Only a body-mind has something to gain. Understand? So here's the message. It takes years to dissociate from the body-mind. This is the message. We're not here in Vedanta to say, just listen to this and, I'm Atma now, I can speak as consciousness. My journey's over. This is extremely unintelligent way to look at it, because our I has been associated with the body-mind for decades. To suddenly expect a sudden shift is completely unrealistic. So that's what happened to the criminal, right? He thought he read the Gita and now he's free. I can just do whatever I want. I can go there, I can do this, I can get that. It's not mine, it's just the world, it's just a dream. This is not what we're talking about. So the message is remaining humble no matter what. Because as soon as we start talking about jnana yoga, how I am consciousness, a small ahamkara, arrogance, can partially start creeping in and start kind of putting itself higher, and I'm independent from this world, and it produces extremely damaging results for the individual and those whom individual associates with. I like how James put it. He said to me very clearly, keep your head down, do your sadhana. This is a personal journey. Don't tell anyone what you're doing. This is between you and yourself. Keep your head down, do your sadhana, and pray to the Lord that this knowledge is firmly established. Very humble. No one is going above or below. Just, I'm still here as a body-mind. Ishvara is the big, the ultimate being here, not anyone else. For that reason, keep your head down, worship your actions to the field, and just pray for the best. It's very humble. It's not some, I'm a jnani, I know this and you don't. It's got nothing to do with that. So this humility, humbleness is the most important. I said a statement before, and that is, dharma trumps moksha any day. Because nobody needs another enlightened person walking around claiming how they know something, but we do need someone to be an example like Mahatma Gandhi to help us as an example lead the society into what we call dharma, into the right action, right attitude. Yeah, so this is the message of this criminal. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can the jiva still be attracted to something, say the opposite sex?
Yeah.
and still follow that action,
Yeah.
and that's all G. That's all good.
Yeah, perfectly fine. Vedanta is never going to say what not to do or not to do. Because who is a person to restrict or unrestrict things being done in the first place? See, a jnani is the one who knows, sees things as they are. Not putting higher value or lower value, high value onto scriptures, lower value onto copulation. That is not what this is about, because what is that? Who's doing the higher value, lower value? Ahankara, according to what? Its likes and dislikes. According to its samskaras. So this has nothing to do with restricting you or unrestricting, just seeing things as they are without getting lost in it. Understand? It's a very simple answer there.
And being aware of Dharma.
While being aware of Dharma. Be aware of Dharma, there's no problem with anything. Because it will automatically purify one's effort into something that's a lot more pure than something that has carnal desires. Yeah. So it's still there, but it's pure. Yeah, we're never gonna, yeah.
So you move from Dharma to moksha. You can't reach moksha straight away.
That's correct. And even in moksha, Dharma is always the king, because there's still a body here. Yeah. So that means Dharma has to be there no matter what. And then from that aspect, because what is karma yoga? It's nothing but Dharma, following Dharma.
Can you take that idea to things like even drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, that's why we're not going to accept any alcoholics in the Vedanta class, because anything can be misconstrued or taken in the light of my likes and dislikes. You see? Anything. Even I'm free and this world is just a dream can be taken as, oh, I can now do whatever I want. But who's doing that? Likes and dislikes. This is why we do so much purification, karma yoga, before we get to jnana yoga. You see the logic of the order? First karma yoga, purify the mind, be a good person, do the right thing, and then we will speak about moksha. This is why we never speak moksha to those who just want to hear it, because we know it's a mind that hasn't yet been purified.
Would you say that the karma yoga involves the other yogas as well?
That will be verse 16.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah. Okay. It says here, people are deluded, covered by ignorance, and due to that ignorance, people are deluded. When a person is deluded, what is this? What's the implication of delusion? Dukkam, suffering. One way, subtle suffering, or what does delusion mean? I'm not seeing things as they are. And what is that going to cause me? It's going to cause me tension with the environment. You've seen, like, for example, let's say someone knows something here about me, and I walk in, and everyone's just like looking at me. I'm like, why is everyone looking? You know, and I don't know what you're looking. So it's going to have tension. So that's what it means. And I'm going to start thinking ideas. Why are you looking? That means I'm deluded now. That means what? To come straight, I need to ask you. I need to be straight with the environment. This is why it's so hard it's impossible to lie, because lying in itself is delusion. One's self-deluding themselves, which produces what? Dukkam, suffering. So amongst that humility and dharma, another word comes in, total, and dharma, total honesty. Though, I mean, how can you go wrong with that, right? Dharma, honesty, and what's the other word? Huh? Humble. Yeah. Okay, so people are deluded, and that causes suffering. And why are they deluded? Because the identification is with the body. Where does the feeling of delusion happen? In the body. And because the ahamkara is who I am, because I'm not being told anything other than that, therefore I am deluded. And because I am deluded, I am out of alignment with the environment, and therefore I suffer. Nothing's working out for me. Okay. So that means people are deluded. Why? Because of ignorance of the higher self, Atma. Summary. Okay. So let's revise. I'm going to finish verse 15 and 16, which is going to include karma yoga and other practices next week. Let's revise what we've done so far, and we're going to continue this conversation next week. Okay. Karma yoga. We've still got to do a group activity, right? Karma yoga. means there is something to do. This is a revision. Verse 15 over. This is revision. Karma yoga, there is something to do. Jnana yoga, there is something to know. Now, in order to perform karma yoga, what does karma yoga consist of? Karma, we talked about 3 actions, sattvic karmani, raga karmani, tamasa karmani, and the right attitude. So what does this mean? It is impossible to perform karma yoga unless I've been educated what karma yoga is. So how does one perform karma yoga? By having knowledge, being told what karma yoga is. Otherwise, what's going to happen is, as I've observed, is karma yoga gets taken in the wrong light. For example, karma yoga equals working for someone in some ashram and, for the benefit of the whole world. It's got zero to do with that, even though it's one little aspect. But if that aspect is being done at the absence of what karma yoga is, that has no fruit, that action, because it's just doing it for someone else. I don't even know why I'm actually doing it. I have to be told I'm doing it because everything is Ishvara. You understand? This is why it's important to know what karma yoga is before I can actually perform it. Otherwise, I'm doing it for the ashram. But what's the difference between the ashram and the soil and me and the clouds? It's all Ishvara. So that's the difference between knowledge and lack of knowledge. Okay. And knowledge of Atma. Okay, so karma yoga means knowledge of karma yoga, no knowledge of Atma. In stage of karma yoga, we are not interested in knowledge of Atma. Why? What's the purpose of karma yoga? To tame the ego, to tame the ahamkara. Because the ahamkara likes to take ownership of the results. And what is karma yoga? Offering my actions, that means done by the ego, to the field. That means the field is more important than me. So over time, the field that is Ishvara becomes more important than the little ahamkara. That's the logic behind it. So the purpose of karma yoga is to slowly start to diffuse the sense of ownership. Me, what's in it for me? How can I gain? What can I extract out of this? This has to go. How? Through karma yoga. There's no way out of it. As you said, first dharma and then moksha. It's inbuilt into the system. You cannot cheat it. You cannot go out of it. Because why? What do we say about Ishvara? Jagat karmani. Jagat karana. Jagat karana, the one that creates the world. And you are part of that world. Just like every wave is part of that ocean, that means no wave is an exception how the system works. Okay. Now, we've done Karma Yoga summary. Second, Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga, we said something to know. Okay. Know what? There's only one aspect of what is there to know in Jnana Yoga. Knowledge of Atma. That's all Jnana Yoga is. It's not knowledge of anything but Atma. So we say, okay, here's the official definition of Jnana. Jivatma, Paramatma, Aikyam, Jnanam. Jivatma, Paramatma, Aikyam, Jnanam. So what does this mean? What is Jivatma? What do we say Jivatma is? The small individual. What is Paramatma? Brahman. Aikyam means what? Sameness, that is the identity, is the sameness of identity. And Jnanam, knowledge. That means Jnana Yoga is the knowledge that there is no difference, that the consciousness of Jiva and the consciousness of the whole is exactly the same. That's all Jnana Yoga means. That means the consciousness of the individual, the microcosmic, and the consciousness of the universal are exactly the same. That's all Jnana Yoga is. And when I say Jivatma, don't exclude objects of the world, tangible objects also. Okay, so that means Jivatma, Paramatma, Aikyam, Jnanam. The knowledge that the microcosm and the macrocosm are the same.
I have one question. Sorry. We talked about Dharma.
Yeah.
and we talked about karma yoga.
Yeah.
Doesn't karma yoga needs to be done incorporating dharma? All our actions,
Yeah.
all karma yoga should be based on dharma.
That's right. That's
So
right.
karma and dharma go together.
Absolutely, because in order to see, that's a good question, in order to see everything as Ishvara, what's the subtle implication? I have to have done a lot of what? Education of what Ishvara is. And to do that, I'm going to get what? I'm going to realize that I cannot cheat the system. And what is that? Dharma.
Could you say if you're living 100% pure Dharma, that you've actually exhausted karma?
100% pure Dharma is we exhaust the what?
If you're living a life of and this is theoretical,
Yeah.
if you're living a life of 100% pure Dharmic existence, who's tuning the nature perfectly,
Yeah.
then you're actually exhausting your karma.
Yes. Yes. One point is there's a common myth that goes that we have to exhaust all of our raga dvesha in order to have a mind sustainable, appropriate for jnana yoga. This is not true, because just breathing alone, just living alone, you're going to create actions constantly. So it is not and actions has a consequence. So it's impossible to completely rid of one's likes and dislikes completely. Likes and dislikes will always remain there, but enough have to be cleared, at least those ones which constantly externalize my mind and cause disinterest towards the scriptures. So this should be another reassuring statement that I don't have to clear everything, just enough so it doesn't dominate my life. Yeah?
It's funny how those old jokes and truisms come about. There's the old ones you probably heard of, my karma run over my dogma, which is sort of the dogma is more like your vasanas, you know, and your karma runs over your dogma, and that's sort of kind of true in a funny sort of way. And then dharma trumps karma.
Dharma trumps. Okay, let's put an order to this. Karma yoga practice purifies the mind, gives way for jnana yoga. Jnana yoga becomes a means to what? An end being moksha. Now, one point before we close. Knowledge with a capital K can only be, at least in the Vedic world, can only be attributed to that which never changes. So the official word for knowledge is, when you say knowledge, what do we think of? Knowledge of the car, knowledge of the sun, knowledge of the environment, knowledge of everything. In this context, we cannot give knowledge to that individual. Because even if I'm telling you that hydrogen is what consists, what's mainly in the sun, that's true. But is that true when there's a dissolution of the universe? When it all goes back into Brahman? So was it really true? It was only true from what? Standpoint of creation. So it was knowledge, but it was only relative. That is why it was mithya. That is why the only knowledge that deserves the word knowledge is that knowledge which is in the present, in the past, in the present, and in the future. That which never changes. So that's why we say jnana yoga is knowledge with a capital K of that which never changes, being what? Brahman. So we're not talking about particulars. Particulars belongs to the world of changes. We're talking about knowledge, like that knowledge which is consistent for everyone, universally. Okay, we will close here and we will continue with verse 15, which will include, what we're doing now is the cause of ignorance. Verse 16 is treatment, how to get rid of ignorance, because this is a jnana yoga section now, verses 13 to 21. Okay, and we're on 13, we started 13, right? We've done halfway to 15, so 13 to 21 is jnana yoga. So we're going to continue this next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.